How's everybody doing? Any thoughts on life? Parker, do you have your mic available today, or are you still without the mic? Vision stressed. Welcome to the old world. Even before the pandemic, it was the same. Well, we have Columbus Day coming up in 10 days. Sorry to hear that, Denise, that you're also busy and stressed. Okay, well, do what you do to make your life a bit more manageable. Okay, we'll wait another couple of minutes before we start. Hi, Karen. How are you?
Hi, Professor. Good morning. How are you?
I'm good. I've been enjoying your blogs.
Oh, thank you.
This is really exciting.
Yeah, I like doing them.
That's good. That's good. I mean, that's the only. How else do we get,
Yeah.
engaged if we're not in class? Are you doing okay otherwise?
Yeah, I'm doing good. Just staying busy with all my classes, but can't complain.
Do you have the ones that are doozies that are not going too well?
I mean, no, they're pretty, some of them are hard, but it's fine. I just get things done.
That's
That's
the way
it.
life progresses.
Right. I'm just working on applications for graduate school, so that's kind of been a little stressful, but
Oh,
this is,
where are you applying to?
I'm applying to PSY programs for school and clinical psychology.
Ouch. Ouch.
Yeah.
I have to tell you that in the 18 years that I've been at CSI, we only had one student ever accepted to a clinical program. Yes.
I know.
And yeah, it's because it's an 8% acceptance rate.
I know, but I've been working hard, so hopefully.
Well, I think you could do a little bit of a diversification of the application. You could also apply for counseling.
I've looked into that too. I'm also applying to master's programs in school psychology.
Oh, okay.
So I like the school aspect. I did a dual degree in education also. So
Oh,
I'm
I
hoping
see.
that helps my application a little bit.
Good, good, good. Here we have quite a successful story. We've had people at Brooklyn, school psych, I think at NYU, St. John's, a bunch. So masters in school psych is a really, really good way.
Yeah,
Clinical psych, we'll keep our fingers crossed
I
for you.
hope so. I hope so. Some of the programs I'm applying to are like a dual program. So it's like a master's program for 2 years, and then it's the clinical psych for 3. So it's a combined.
I see. It's masters en route. Okay.
Masters en route, right? So it's a little quicker and more concrete of a program. So that's what I'm hoping for. And I've been to many open houses over the past 2 years, and they claim that they accept a lot of undergraduate students. I hope. I don't know, but I do. I have some experience, so I'm hoping that, and I
Good,
have good grades.
good,
So we'll
good.
see. I'm crossing my fingers. If not, I have a backup plan, and then we'll see what happens.
All right. Thank you, Karen, for sharing with us. Okay, folks, let's start with what we're doing today, which of course is chapter 4. but let's start with some practicalities first. Next week, which is going to be week 5, we don't have a class on Tuesday, September 29th, because CUNY is following the Monday schedule. It's all Jewish holidays that are kind of bunching up in such a way that Mondays are off. So what will happen, we will have a lecture, the one that we're having today, not on Tuesday, but on Thursday, October 1st. Again, as it is with all the lectures so far, your attendance is optional. It's an asynchronous class. But again, if you attend and then write a 200-word summary and extension, hopefully, then that could be your one of the points for your participation in class. Also, good news is that there is no quiz for week 5, because I would like you to focus on your lab report 1, which is due October 1st by 10 a.m. That's when the class starts. And obviously, I would expect to see only one submission per group, so you don't have to do it twice. And the format, we'll talk more about it on Thursday. The format should be either Word for Windows or PDF. Do not share the Google disk links with me. That's very cumbersome. It has to be submitted through the assignment component of the Blackboard in Finding Fives section. Then obviously quiz 4, which is on chapter 5, will be due a week after, October 5th, Monday by 10 p.m., the usual. Hi, Justin. So that's the logistics for next week. And now the second piece is the work that you have been doing in your blogs. I read them. Sometimes I reply, and I'll give you an example in a second. Remember that one way to accumulate the point is to actually respond to somebody else's blog entry, and I would suggest these 4 by Nick, Karen, Leroy, and this week Amanda. Really excellent blogs, interesting to read. So I encourage all of you to go to your classmates' blogs and check them out. Here's one, because I was grading yesterday and today. There was activity 3.1 that had a question like this: which famous Dutch painters continued the tapestry tradition? In particular, the tapestry that I mentioned in the lectures, the Lady and the Unicorn. And these were the painters that started the genre of 5 senses. Now, I had a bit of a laugh reading a bunch of answers to these questions, because quite a few people, I got like 5, said that the famous Dutch painter who continued the tapestry tradition was Tracy Chevalier. Now, you guys have you read the question? The question is famous Dutch painters. Do you think Tracy Chevalier is a famous Dutch painter? Well, if you thought she was, this is her website. Okay, so Tracy
I
Chevalier.
actually saw my mistake and I was like, no, she's definitely not. Because like I saw it was like a novelist, and I thought she was like that was the only painting she like painted. Like I thought she was like a part-time painter or something like that. You know,
But
it was like
Justin, the question was famous Dutch painters. So she had to be famous, she had to be Dutch, and she had to be a painter. And she's none of the 3. So tapestry was a medieval piece, and the famous Dutch painters were Bruegel and Rubens. So they're the ones who continue the tradition of the medieval tapestry with 5 senses, and they actually started that genre. So those of you who would like to find out about famous Dutch painters,
Is there
And
time to delete it?
well, it's already graded, Justin.
Oh,
So,
okay.
I mean, what I did, I gave those of you who cited Tracy as only half a point. I mean, you've done some work, but the work was wrong. So let's focus in the future on the actual questions. And I also have to remind you that your entries should be at least 200 words in length, and they have to include URLs for the sources. So some people, when they were answering the linear perspective question or trompe-l'oeil question, just said that that's what it is. No examples. I understand it's not always easy to post something into the blog, so as long as you provide the URL, I'm fine. But you can't just lift a couple of sentences from Wikipedia and think that you've done what you were supposed to do. Please read questions, provide sources, and make sure that your blog is a little bit substantial. So 2 lines, 3 lines is not going to cut it. So if you see half points for this week, that's for these reasons. Either it's the wrong answer, like Tracy Chevalier is a famous Dutch painter, or you don't have URLs for the stuff that you describe, or your answer is very short. Again, we have still plenty of time for you guys to rake up these points, but be mindful about the question and the requirements. Okay, any other questions from any of you about anything that has to do with logistics of the class?
Hi, Professor. I got an email that said I didn't take quiz 2 and 3.
Yeah, I don't have any grades for you, Leroy, on Blackboard.
I responded to your email. I took all the quizzes. It
But what,
shows my scores on Blackboard in grades.
strange, because it doesn't. Okay, Leroy, let me check again. Let's do it during the break, okay? I was very surprised because I have your grade for quiz 1, but I don't have any grades for you for quizzes 2 or 3. So let's investigate it during the break, okay?
Sounds good. Thank you.
All right, good. So let's now switch gears to chapter 4. Attention is not an easy topic, although it has a bunch of interesting sort of applied extensions. So let's see if we can kind of focus on those. So let's do a little bit of let's see if we can do a couple of activities. I don't know, as always, there are issues with how technology works. And that's going to be our introduction. And then we'll focus mostly on selective attention in 2 modalities, an auditory modality and in visual modality. So here, for the auditory modality, I want to talk a little bit about probably the very first information processing model in cognitive psychology. This is Donald Broadbent's model of attention as information filter, and then the continuation of that work by Anne Treisman. Anne Treisman, who unfortunately died just 2 years ago, when she was 83, I think, is a very important figure in contemporary cognitive psychology. And we will continue to we talked about her in our perception chapter last week, and we continue to talk about her today, actually in 2 places, both in the auditory modality with her attenuation theory of attention as an information filter and her feature integration theory, FIT. Then we'll look a little bit of things that kind of fun about attention that has to do with inattentional blindness. And there's an activity posted for you about change blindness. Then we hopefully will get to the main question of our times: why can't we focus? And maybe if we have time, again, unlikely, but we could continue on Thursday depending on what we have to do for lab report 1. We can talk more about divided attention and controlled versus automatic processes in attention, and things like attention disorders. So all of that I don't think we'll have time to get to today, but just in case. All right. Now, my favorite psychologist of all times is William James. This is the first American psychologist who wrote the book called The Principles of Psychology. Actually, it's more like a textbook than a book. James himself was not an experimentalist. He was a theorist. He wrote a lot about various aspects of cognition from the theoretical point of view. And that's one of his quotations that pertains to attention, right? So he says, "It is the taking of possession by the mind in clear and vivid form of one out of what seem several simultaneously possible objects or trains of thought. Focalization, concentration of consciousness are of its essence. It implies withdrawal from some things in order to deal effectively with others." Now, hopefully, when you guys get to Psi 352, you will spend some time learning about William James and his contribution to American psychology in particular. And the book, although it's, as you can see, it's 130 years old, is still full of things that are completely true. That's amazing for a piece of work that's 130 years old. So that's his definition. Mostly he focuses on concentration. That is, he focuses on selective attention. All right, so a few definitions. Again, you can think of them as complementing each other, right? So it has to be with internal processes. Again, attention is not easy to observe. It's mental functioning, and it's setting priorities, right? What is it that we're paying? That's why we call it to pay attention to. What is it we're paying attention to at this particular moment? Okay, continuation is you have a narrowed range of stimuli or events that you can attend to. Now that places attention squarely close to sensation and perception. In fact, you will see that in many descriptions of attention, it is actually placed between sensation and perception. Now we know sensation gives us proximal stimulus, which is the pattern of energy that continues through our central nervous system to the projection areas in the brain, and that's where we form the percept. So if we put the attention in between at a certain place, which is a debatable point, we can say that attention is the one that is responsible for whatever percepts we're going to get at the end. We're not going to get everything. We're going to get some. How much some, again, is an open question. And we can also think of attention as something that will allow us to focus on the input so that we can respond to it. And that's the whole purpose of cognition, is to be able to harness our cognitive abilities such as perception, attention, memory, language, thinking, etc., in order for us to be able to act in the world, right? To do something as a response to the stimulation from the outside world. Okay, so these are sort of in complementary distribution to each other. They all sort of mean the same thing, but formulated in different words. Okay, so William James, 1890, sort of the next important step, and I mentioned that early on during week 0, another American psychologist, more contemporary to us than William James, whose name is Ulrich Neisser. Now, Ulrich Neisser also wrote a first cognitive psychology textbook, and unfortunately, he died quite a few years ago. So he spent quite a lot of time in his textbook on selective attention. So here is the demonstration. I hope it will work because now I have a little trick called share computer sound. Hopefully it will work. So in this little demonstration, it's very short. You will be watching two teams of three people, three men in black t-shirts and three men in white t-shirts, tossing a basketball. And in this, in his original demonstration, he asked participants to press a key on the keyboard each time a black shirted player passes the ball. So what I would like you to do now is to pull out your notebook or your sheet of paper, whatever you have on hand. And let's see if we can watch this clip. And your job is to make a tick in your notebook each time you see a member of the black t-shirt team passing a ball. All right? Before I start, does everybody understand what needs to be done? So here is the task again. If you need me to explain more, just unmute yourself or raise your hand or do something. Because once we start, we can't stop until we're done. Okay. Everybody seems to be okay. All right. So remember, use your notebook and make a tick mark in it each time you see a person in a black t-shirt passing the ball, obviously, to his teammate. All right, so I'm going to start it. The sound actually is not important here, so if you don't hear anything, it should work. Don't worry about it. Just focus on the video, okay, and make your ticks.
Ten. 20. 30. 40. 50.
Okay. So this is the explanation to this. So let me ask you first question. Did you guys hear any sound?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, great. So that trick works. Okay, so the whole idea was to make sure that you focus on these passes and you should not be able to notice the woman walking with an umbrella. Okay, let's use our toolbar in the participants. If you have noticed the woman with the umbrella, click yes on the green button. And if you haven't, click no on the red button. Okay, so far so good. Equal number of people who noticed and equal number of people who didn't. We have a couple more people who could Karen, you could vote too. Parker. Okay, so let's watch it again. Now this time you're not focusing on counting the passes. You're focusing on whether you can notice the woman. Maybe I should go back first. And now we'll start over again. Okay, there she is. Those of you who did not notice her before, there she is walking through the play space. Okay, there she is again in the middle. All right. So now we know we focused on the passes. Sometimes I hear the number of 14, sometimes the number of 20. But what really is, have you noticed anything besides the 6 men? That's an interesting actually point how Neeser created this clip, because it wasn't really easy in 1970s. No digital tools, no anything that we have, Photoshop, so things that we can do today, a green background. So what he did, he actually recorded 2 episodes. One episode where only the 3 men in black t-shirts played, the other one, the episode of only the other team playing, and then he used the mirrors to superimpose one on top of the other. So if you're interested to see, one could say, hey, listen, people didn't notice the woman with an umbrella because it's kind of a strange quality, sort of transparent figures, right? We're not used to that in our everyday visual perception. We know it's very clear when it's in the fovea. So if you're interested to see what happens, of course, you shouldn't do it on yourself because now you know, but ask your significant other or your family members to watch a clip that was created by Dan Simons, and we'll get to him at the end of the lecture. Dan Simons and his team recreated this clip sort of using modern good quality video. And instead of there's also a woman with an umbrella version, but there's also a gorilla version where a woman wearing a gorilla suit, which just happened to lie in the office of one of the collaborators, the gorilla walks through the play space and sort of beats itself on the chest, again, surprisingly in a good quality with normal perception. Surprisingly, half of people did not notice the gorilla. And it's a famous story in contemporary American psychology because Dan Simons recreated this in one of the American Psychological Association conventions. It's a huge event with thousands of people. And during the talk that was happening, a gorilla showed up on stage, obviously a gorilla, a person wearing a gorilla suit. And again, half of the psychologists didn't notice it. So it's a very, very typical of how our selective attention works. But again, so find Dan Simons' modern clip and show it to one of your family members and see if they notice the gorilla. Okay, let's do another demonstration. At this point, I'm going to show you a text. It's a short one, just one slide, that will have font in two colors, in normal black and in green. So I'm asking you to really focus on the green font and just read the message in green. Okay, I'm going to give you a minute to do so. All right, I don't want you to reread it, so I'm going to go to the next slide. And now I'm asking you, using your notebook, to write down what you remember from the message. Well, first of all, of course, what you remember from the stuff in green. So I'm going to give you another minute or two to do so. Okay. Parker, the buttons were underneath the participants. You have to open the participants sidebar. Raise your hand when you're done writing in the participants bar so I can see who is finished. Rebecca, Karen, Raphael, Noor. Good. Leroy. Is anybody willing to read to us what you have written? Rebecca, would you mind unmuting yourself and reading to us what you remember?
Sure, I was just going to type that I will.
No, just read it.
I'm losing my voice a little bit, so.
Oh, well.
Our mind focus, this is what I remembered, it wasn't word for word. Our mind focuses on cues we are given, so we focus on a certain stimulus, but we can also be distracted by the stimulus that we aren't focusing on.
Fantastic. Rebecca, did you notice anything from the black font?
I read something about Lady Gaga, and then like certain times, like the little words like in or on, or that would like distract me, and I would have to like go back and read it again because it didn't make sense in my head, and then I realized that it wasn't written in green. So
Right, fantastic. Noor, what did you notice about the black font? Can you unmute yourself, Noor, and tell us what you noticed? Okay, I'm not sure about Noor. How about Jeffrey? Can you unmute yourself, Jeffrey, and tell us what you have noticed about the black font? Let's see. I didn't remember word for word. I noticed Lady Gaga. Okay. The mic is not working. I see. Okay. So can somebody, you don't have to sort of give us the examples, but can you speculate for a minute? Yes, you were supposed to focus on the green font, but some of you have noticed bits from the black font. So one of the bits was a proper name, right? Lady Gaga. Okay. What else sort of pops out from messages? That won't distract me. I have to reread that sentence. Colorado, very good. That's also a proper name, Justin. Yes. Uh-huh. Anything else that anybody noticed? So we have Colorado and Lady Gaga. All right. Well, let's go back to the message. Now, just read the black font. So in addition to the proper names like Colorado and Lady Gaga, we often notice numbers. So there is 300 here, and there is 600 here. And there's more proper names, Central City, Rocky Mountains, and so on. So we can't quite say that all we get is the message we focus on, because certain features of the unintended message also get through. So that was my question to you. Did you notice anything in black? And what are they? Well, they're special words in this case, proper names and numbers. But you tried very hard to focus on the green message, meaning that you lost most of the black stuff, even though it was there, it was visible to you. Okay, so all of that is just a way to think of how we deal with selective attention. Again, I'm just repeating that. So selective attention is something that I really want to focus on, probably with no time for divided, unless we do something on Thursday. We might, because it is important for lab report 1. And the textbook provides you with information about attention from 3 points of view. It's a filter of information. That's when I said if we locate the filter in between sensation and perception, then the closer it is to the sensation part, we are least likely to notice other information. We will only get the physical characteristics. So proper names stick out because they have capital letters, for example. And if we locate our informational filter closer to perception, then we may be getting more of the meaning from the unattended message. There's also an approach that has to do with mental capacity. That is, do we find it difficult to focus because it requires a lot of cognitive abilities that have to be mobilized? And then we'll talk a little bit about the feature integration theory. It's about primitive features in attention that grab it and then can be bound together to give us the percept. And that's Anne Treisman's attenuation theory, that in auditory modality, and then primitive features and conjunction of features in the visual modality. Again, these 3 I explained in the textbook, but I want to spend just a little more time on them. All right, so the idea is that, obviously, remember we have our proximal stimulus, that's the pattern of energies. it impinges on our senses, and then we get transduction, where the energies from the outside world are transduced into chemical, electrical impulses that the central nervous system understands. Now, our central nervous system is very powerful, but it is limited too. So we are bombarded by the stimuli a lot, and we have to make sacrifices in terms of what we can process and what we will have to ignore. Okay? So that's the assumption, that perhaps attention is there for the reasons of bottlenecks in our central nervous system. And again, it's important for us because it has the implications for the information processing approach to cognition that is a hallmark of contemporary cognitive psychology. And the second one, remember the first one is information processing approach, boxes and arrows, input, storage, output. And the second one is mental representations, things like percepts and memory traces that we don't observe directly. We just have to infer them from the functioning of our cognitive abilities, so to speak. So, all right, selective attention. Again, I just keep repeating a bunch of things for you in terms of the trade-off. If we are talking about selective attention, so if we are focused on something, we have to sacrifice everything else. And we do that for many reasons, one of which is our limited cognitive processing capacity, or our limited central nervous system capacity. So if we are ignoring some of the stuff and focusing on another, our accuracy in perceiving the stimuli is going to be affected. So let's have a look at that. The most famous way of doing that is through the dichotic listening. The word dichotic means two. So here, the way this task, and this is 1950s, probably one of the first important contributions to information processing approach, because at that time, it was possible to study auditory modalities. So here is the setup of the dichotic listening. You have headphones that are wired in such a way that you get two different messages in your ears. So you get one message in your right ear, okay, and then John turned rapidly toward, and then you get another message, in this case, a list of words in the left ear. So that's step number one. You have to have headphones, and you have to be able to create two different messages. Now, by itself, it's not much fun, but it's, nothing major. We often listen to many things simultaneously. So the kick is that the person or participant is supposed to shadow one of the messages. What do I mean by shadow? Shadowing means that you are asked to repeat one of the messages as soon as possible. That is, as you're listening to it, you now say the same stuff. There will be a bit of a delay, of course, because you have to listen to it, but you can't wait until you hear. You have to sort of go on with the flow. Now, if you just do it with one message, it's fine. We all are very good shadows in that sense. But once you have two competing messages, it becomes a nightmare. Because your attention obviously is now sort of split in two, plus you have to talk, and you have to talk fast. Now, some people actually can get quite good at shadowing, and this type of experimentation of a method was very popular in the 1950s, but obviously fell out of favor since then. It's because it's not much that you can do with that. So what I suggest you do, so this is just the repetition. You have two messages and one message designated by the experimenter. The experimenter will say, now shadow what you hear in your right ear and ignore what you hear in your left ear, right? So this is called attended ear, right? This is called unattended ear, left. So, of course, the point is not whether you can do this task. The point is to see what kind of information is getting through, especially on the unattended ear. So one of the things that I suggest you do for one of your activities is to try the dichotic listening task. We don't really have time for that, but let me see if I can just show you what it looks like. Let's see. Yeah. I can never do that with okay, not a problem. Just go to, there is one particular site that I'm using a lot today called Go Cognitive. And the link is obviously provided to you on the the Blackboard for week 4 in activities. And when you go, there's a link there, you click on that, you go to Go Cognitive, and there is a demonstration of selective attention where you have 3 places represented by 3 speakers where you can put either children. There are 3, well, obviously these are cartoon children, 3 children or 3 adults. So what you can do is you can place one child in one speaker location, and now you have to perform a task where you need to notice number 3. So the child will be saying numbers 7, 8, 2, 1, 3, 9, and you're supposed to notice 3. So when you do it with one child, not a problem. You remove the child, put one of the adults, not a problem. Now you put a child and an adult together and you say, yes, you have to notice 3 pronounced by the child. Now, of course, the adult will be also saying 3, but the difference in voices, the pitch is higher for a child versus a lower pitch in a male adult. It becomes more difficult, but it's still doable. But when you put 2 children and you only have to follow one of them, it becomes almost impossible because the physical characteristics of the 2 children's voices are almost identical. The same with 2 men, although, I mean, there's a little bit of variation in terms of their pitch and so on. So try the dichotic listening task. It's kind of fun. Again, you can use one of your significant other members of your family to do it for you and see how they can do that. That's the original dichotic listening task. Okay. So what has usually happened in such experiments, and this is Colin Cherry here at the bottom, and Colin Cherry is the person who is credited with creating actually dubbing this particular type of experience that we have in real life. And I'm going to get to that in a second. So what do people notice from the unattended message? Well, when the language changes, they do. So if somebody was speaking English and in the unattended channel, this is the left one, suddenly that person switches to German, you notice that. Now, if the speaker was a male speaker and suddenly it switches to a female speaker, you've noticed that too. If there is a buzzing sound, that's very easy. So there are a bunch of things from the unattended message that rise to the consciousness for the participant. So the conclusions was from that early experimentation that what's recognized is the low-level, bottom-up physical characteristics of the unattended message. But you don't get the individual words. You don't get the semantic content. You don't know what the meaning is. It's lost on you. Now, then comes Colin Cherry, who says, hey, but if you don't notice anything from unattended channel, what about when you are at the cocktail party? Now, of course, we don't have them anymore these days, especially, but you can imagine being in a, a cafeteria or in the bar, in a busy restaurant, or some kind of reception, which is better because then you will have a bunch of people in various corners who you may know, and they may know you. So what happens is you are chatting with the people in your little group, and suddenly 6 feet or 12 feet away, another group mentions your name, even could be your last name. And suddenly you are completely uninterested in the conversation that is going on in your group, and you are listening, you're trying to listen to what they have to say about you in that group. So that was dubbed as the cocktail party effect. Now, remember, you're not supposed to be able to get that because that's not a physical characteristic of the unattended channel. It's your name, it has semantics to it. So turns out that you could explain the cocktail party effect in terms of where you position your attentional filter. So remember, the closer it is to sensation, the least semantics or meaning will get through. But if you move it a little bit more by saying, well, certain things go through, then perhaps we can explain the cocktail party effect. Okay. So let's now look at how it was explained by using this first approach to attention as a filter. And there's only two that I want to talk about: Broadbent's 1958, very first one, and slightly later, and Treisman's attenuation model that is more compatible with the cocktail party effect. All right. So the reason why we want to talk about Broadbent is because it's the very first information processing approach to cognitive phenomenon such as attention. Okay, it has boxes, something goes in, something happens in the box, something comes out. Now, Broadbent was more of a information processing person than a psychologist. So, and he was also very interested in the early sort of computational approaches, although no computers yet, but there were mathematical computational approaches. So he used a lot of terminology that comes from this part of cognitive science, as we call it today. Okay, so he says, all right, we have these messages in the outside world, and you can see all these arrows. I guess we should use some annotation. Okay, so these are the messages. They get through our sensory organs, right? We know, again, proximal stimulus. They get transduced, and as you can see, still all the messages are getting through. Okay, Justin, yes. Good. And then comes the attention. So this is what we think of attention as a filter, right here. So you can see that now, out of all the arrows, all the messages that were coming into attentional filter, only one survived. This is, of course, a simplification, but that's the idea. And then it gets to the next level of cognition. In this case, this is all about memory. So again, you see the boxes and you see the arrows and you see the flow of the information. That's why it's called information processing approach. And like I said before, Broadbent was a mathematician, computational specialist, so he used a lot of terminology like channels. So the arrows go through, the messages go through these channels, whatever they are, right? He wasn't a neuroscientist. Then they get to a particular place where they are stored for a few seconds, which is going to be our sensory buffer when we talk about memory models. Then it gets through the attention, which is selective filter. It's of limited capacity. It focuses on one of the messages. Everything else gets deleted. And then what's left can be processed in memory. So again, boxes and arrows with the input and some kind of output, presumably. Information now stored in memory that we can use for later events. So here is the whole thing that how this model would work. It would say it's only about physical information in the messages. Whatever is not selected is going to be discarded, so it's not processed at all. So that's kind of difficult to use when you want to explain things like, well, how do we get the cocktail party effect? How did we get some information from the black font message in our second demonstration? Broadbent's early, right? So he places the filter very early. Doesn't give us a very good explanation for these events, for these effects. So now we can say, well, what if you position your filter a little bit further away from sensation toward perception? In this case, more stuff should be getting through. And this is what Anne Treisman depicted here with Barack Obama in 2013 when she received the highest award for scientists in this country, the National Medal of Science. That's 2013. Like I said, she just died 2 years ago. In case she was in Princeton all her life, and she is actually British, and she was married to Tversky, to Kahneman, one of the psychologists that we'll be talking about when we get to higher level thinking and decision making and heuristics. So her point was, well, if we do get some information through, right, we should perhaps move the filter along the way. And this is how she did that. So in her experiment, this is again auditory modality, participants were supposed to attend to the orange stuff, the right ear, and they were supposed to shadow it. So they're hearing, I saw the girl, and they're supposed to shadow that. So they're supposed to say, I saw the girl. And in the left ear, the unattended channel, they get another message. Song was about. Okay, whatever, nothing major. Now, they should continue to shadow me that bird, whatever is in the attended channel. So the people are supposed to say, I saw the girl, me that bird. Instead, you can see I'm switching from caps here to caps here. The message jumping in the street was in the unattended channel. They were not supposed to notice that. Instead, people would hesitate and they would say, I saw the girl jumping in the street. So they would switch to the unattended channel because it makes sense. All right. Again, if we put this filter very early on, there's no way of explaining why people got drawn to the message in the unattended ear. Well, because these two parts make a sense. They make a full sentence that has a meaning. So instead of saying this, they said this. So that was the types of experimentation that proposed, well, that forced the necessity to modify Broadbent's early filter, attentional filter, to what Anne Treisman called attenuator. An attenuator is some of the information gets through, the kinds of information gets through. It's an interesting question, but some does. So it is attenuated. Some semantic analysis, the meaning of the message, happens. So how do we explain the cocktail party effect? Well, think about your proper name, your first name, your last name. That's a very important stimulus. It's very active in your vocabulary. So when you hear your name, your attention immediately switches to it. But there are other things that happen simultaneously. I mean, if you keep listening to certain words and they are highly activated in your lexicon, that will help you to switch. So in addition to the physical characteristics that we talked about a few minutes ago, it's also some semantics. Now, of course, you can imagine, all right, so this is the comparison of the two. You can see that the filter for broadbands only allows one main message to get through. For Anne Treisman's attenuation model, the attended message, of course, is getting through. That's the same as in broadbands, but also some features of unattended messages if they are important to you for whatever reason. Okay? And that's the name that the terminology that you use. You call it attenuator, a perceptual filter. And the way she described it in her work was that unattended message is heard with a dull ear, not deaf, but dull. So before we go on a little break, I just have to mention that there were theories that actually positioned that filter all the way at the perception level, saying basically everything that is getting through the outside world is processed. I mean, how come we don't remember everything? Well, it's a memory story, not an attention. And this is known as the late filter. So you can see that here is the, let me get that. You can see that nothing is getting through here. That's the early filter. Broadband maybe a little bit more for attenuator, and for full late theories, almost everything gets through. And then we have to explain why is it that we don't seem to notice everything. Okay, it's 11:10. Let's take a break until 11:17. Leroy, I'm gonna check. So please stay put with me so I can see what's going on. Okay. All right. There's absolutely nothing. So Leroy, what I'm going to do, I'm going to give you a co-host privileges. Why don't you go to the Blackboard, to your My Grades, and show me what it looks like. So give me a second. I have to, oops. I have to make you a co-host. All right. Yes. Okay, Leroy. So now when you go to Blackboard, you can share the screen with me. Uh-huh. All right. So all I see is practice test and test one. Where are the other two? And that's exactly what I see on my Blackboard. I see your pretest, and I see practice, and I see quiz 1. I don't see quizzes 2 or 3.
Give me a second.
Sure. Recording. The second approach that is mentioned in the textbook is thinking of attention as a mental capacity. Now, this is actually a very practical approach to attention, and this is what the textbook is talking about, is work by David Strayer from the University of Utah and his colleagues. This is an early article from 2001. Where, of course, they wanted to see what will happen if people are distracted when they drive. Now, this is 2001. The cell phones at that time were very clunky, big, not anything like the smartphones we know today. And so what they focused on was to use a driving simulator. Has anybody ever tried a driving simulator?
I have.
Yeah. And how was it?
It was to see if I could still drive after my accident. They did it NYU.
Ah, huh. I was in Germany. I go to Germany a lot. I have a bunch of collaborations there, and we went to a place called Dresden. And Dresden is sort of in East Germany. It has this wonderful gallery and on, but they also have a Volkswagen factory there. And in that factory, they have a showroom, and in the showroom, they have a driving. Okay. A steering wheel for a driving game. Okay. Yeah, but this is more like a feeling of the actual car. And in that simulator in Germany, you actually get inside the car. So if I know you guys know about Volkswagen, you probably know Touareg. It's the SUV, Volkswagen. Then there is a bunch of others. And there is another one called Phaeton, and that's their luxury version. So they had this Phaeton in the showroom, which was a simulator. So you get in and you drive the car with all the stops, with all the signs and everything, and you can accelerate, decelerate, you can do all kinds of things. It's actually fun. So this is what Stray and Johnston did. They put people into a simulator and they asked them to drive while they were either listening to a conversation, listening to radio music, or in silence, right? And they measured accuracy. That is, did they notice all the signs, like a stop sign, and how fast they were in their reaction to these regulatory rules. That is, at the stop sign, you have to stop. At the yield sign, you have to yield. At, yellow traffic light, you have to decelerate and make sure you don't run the red light and stuff like that. And obviously, you can imagine that they found that the worst performance in terms of accuracy and speed was when people were talking. So music by itself wasn't that much of an issue. Silence obviously was the best. So from this time, from 2001, it's almost 20 years, Straya has done a lot of more work. And this is what we know. This is a little it's from 2009, so it's about 10 years old. But here is the idea that the Department of Transportation found that 5,400 people died in 2009. And of those, 48, which is a huge percentage, crashes were linked to distraction. All right. This number is a little bit better than the numbers from 2008. And so in cases where people survived, or which, of course, hopefully that's more than people who died, the distraction was the main reason in 16% of the crashes and deaths in both years. Okay? Of course, it's getting better since then, but what do you guys think? Type in the chat. In addition to cell phone, good. I'm reading Jeff's message. In addition to cell phone or smartphone use, what is the number 2 distraction when you drive? What do you think? Smoking? No. People talking to you. If you have people in the car, okay, yeah, that could be, it's like, talking on the phone, talking to people over radio, possibly. Radio is not too bad. Anybody? Honking. Well, you honk, but that's, sort of momentarily. I think it's driver's response to people talking to them. Okay, so that is the main distraction reason. You're right. Talking either to people in the car, talking to people on the phone. I'm asking you to now identify number 2 distraction in driving. That has nothing to do with talking. Eating, yes, Jeffrey. Bingo. Eating. When people eat, they pay attention to the food. And that's number 2 distractor after talking. All right, so be careful when you munch on your French fries when you drive. So I suggest an activity for you guys that would ask you to perhaps view a couple of clips of David Stray's interviews, and then view your opinion on hands-free cell phone usage. Okay? So we know that there are a lot of legislative efforts, or there have been a lot of legislative efforts across different states to only allow hands-free cell phone use. And now we have very serious data that show it's not about whether you're fumbling with your phone. It's about whether you're paying attention. So think for a second before we finish this activity. Think for a second when you drive with a passenger next to you and you're in conversation with this person. If you're driving sort of in garden variety situation, it's the same route you take, nothing is happening, you're fine, you can chat, you can talk. The moment the situation changes, right? There is some disruption on the road, maybe there is construction, maybe there is somebody running across the street. What happens? So you had a conversation, you're having a conversation with your passenger. What happens when this situation, the banal, trivial situation, changes to a more difficult one? What happens to your conversation with your passenger? Okay, your attention shifts, but what does your passenger do? So you're having a conversation with your friend or with your family member, whoever is with you. If you are now paying more attention to the road, what does the passenger do? Come on, guys, that's not a difficult question. Imagine yourself in this situation. What will you do? Get your attention. You will stop talking, right? You will let the driver focus because you can also see what's going on the road. Yeah, good, Jeffrey. But if you're on the phone, right? The person you're talking to does not share your vision of the road. So he or she doesn't know that your attention needs to be focused on something else. So imagine that you were trying to break up with your boyfriend or girlfriend over the phone. Not a good idea, right? Give me a second. You may not have the second, Jeffrey. That's the problem. Our attention is at the speed of light. No seconds. A second could be a difference between life and death. So that's why perhaps cell phones are not the culprit of the distraction by themselves. It's, you know, what you're engaged in. If you're engaged in a conversation in the car, it's going to be a problem too. But the passenger will be able to react to that because the passenger is also paying attention to what's happening on the road. On the phone, you can't do that. So look at the stuff that David Strayer has done and voice your opinion. It's interesting. Okay, let's now switch gears and talk about selective attention and the visual modality as opposed to the auditory modality that we talked about in the first half of the class. All right, so here again, going back to Anne Treisman, there she is at the bottom. Now we're talking about what we see. Now remember, we talked about it last week that 80% of the information that we get from the outside world comes from vision. So Anne Treisman proposed an idea that whenever we are perceiving something, we actually are perceiving features of that something. So there's an object. Let's say there is a tree. Well, it has a vertical component, right? It has a vertical trunk, and then there may be some branches. So what are we perceiving? We are perceiving lines, their orientation, whether they move or not, right? Color, shape, and so on and so forth. So she proposed that at the very first approach to visual attention, we detect features, and she called them primitive features. They are primitive because they don't require any conscious thinking. You just process color, you just process motion, you just process the shape. So you can do that in parallel. So you can process multiple certain features simultaneously. But then so that's a bottom up. Then she said, okay. Then she said that these features have to be, a term that they use, these features have to be bound, binding of features that will give us the actual percept. And that comes from another set of experiments that Anne Treisman and her team conducted called the visual search. So we'll do that in a second. And this is how, according to the feature integration theory, recognition of a letter will happen. So here we have X, all right? It has lines. The lines are slanted. In this particular case, it also has color. It also has an sort of interception of the two lines. So we perceive those as separate features, primitive features, and then we bring them together at the stage of feature integration, and now we have a conscious percept called the red X. That's just a information processing representation of the feature integration theory. So they're called primitive or elementary, and it's all about bottom up versus top down, which this dichotomy, that the two ways of thinking about how information is coming to us, bottom up, top down, we discussed last week. So I'm going to show you a quick example, okay? I'm not even telling you what the target is. So you're performing a visual search. And you're performing a visual search for one object. It's called the target. So once I click and show you that slide, please type in the chat what you think the target is. Okay, is everybody ready? What was the target? Was it too fast? I did it too quick. Okay, let's do it again. Let's see.
You see anything?
You did not see anything. Oh, okay. That might be a problem. So let me try it again. If it doesn't work, I'll show you the actual screen. Right. Okay. How about now? Was it still too fast? Okay. All right. So let me then show you the actual screen without doing it in the animated mode. What's the target? Perfect. Everybody noticed it now. So let's try it again one more time to see if you can notice. Now you know where to look actually too, right? Okay, good. And now try to catch it now. Yes, no?
Nothing.
Nothing. Okay. So it's probably the way the technology works remotely. Anyway, but here you can see, right, that this O is an easy target because everything else is V's. So the curved lines, right, are very easy to notice. They are primitive features. And what's interesting, it doesn't matter how many of these V's. I could have created a screen with, I don't know, this is like, I think 64, with 500 V's. You would still be able to notice this target, except because we are not in a face-to-face situation, so technology doesn't allow me to give you the real fast presentation. Right, so this is known as the pop-out effect. So those features that are primitive and we pay attention to them, they pop out. But when you sort of cross the lines, it becomes an issue. So let's look at these two examples. What's the target on the left? Yep. Leroy is correct. Diagonal line. Yep. Karen, you think the target is the vertical line on the left? Let's see. Let's get the annotation. This is our target, right? Oh, I clicked by accident. Okay, good. This is the target and it pops out because it's slanted compared to the vertical lines. That are the distractors. So the target is this, the rest are the distractors. Now, let's look at the example on the right. What's the target here? Yes, 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 good job. Now the question two, you guys noticed that this is the target. Note that the distractors here are decomposed into something that would make a cross, right? So if we take a horizontal line and superimpose a vertical line, you're going to get a cross. Did you notice that it took you longer to identify the target cross on the right compared to the slanted line on the left? That should have been the case because this is not a pop-out effect anymore. This is something where you have to take the horizontal line and superimpose a vertical line on top of it to get the cross. So the pop-out effect disappears because now you're at the stage where you have to bind the two primitive features, horizontal and vertical line, together. Let's try another one. Stop this, but I have to get rid of the annotation. giving us, okay, good. Try another one. So the first one is already, A is familiar to you. What about B? What's the target in B? Yes, now it's the vertical line. So note that the difference between A and B is in the A, the target is a slanted line and the vertical lines are distractors. In B, it's the other way around. Now the vertical line is the target and the slanted lines are distractors. And suddenly it's more difficult. I'm not saying it's terribly difficult, but if we were to measure reaction time, you would be much faster in A than in B. Why? These are the same lines. Okay, let's try another one. What's the target in A? The open circle, unfinished circle, correct. What's the target in B? Closed circle, right. Again, you should be able to notice that identifying the target in A is easier, faster than identifying the target in B. But again, these are the same features in both the targets, right, and distractors. So why is it A is easier, faster than B? It's an interesting question, how we perceive and bind these primitive features. Okay, I suggest you do a visual search experiment that again is available to you as one of the activities. If you go to you go cognitive, again, the site that I've mentioned before, and I used it for a couple of activities for you to do. Again, it's fun. You'll see that anything that has to do with bottom-up processing, like O among these, is really, really easy. Anything has to do when you have to bind the features, so you're moving to the next step, becomes much more difficult. That's not terribly difficult. Visual stuff is easy for us, but it takes longer, and therefore we assume that it is, that's how we infer our theory of attention being two stages, because we see the difference in reaction time when we do that. Let me see, let me stop sharing for a second and see if I can show you this. Okay, yes, we probably can do that. Let's go back and now share something else for just a minute. We'll have a look at a different version of. Okay, can you see, guys, the black screen that says press the space bar to start the first trial? Rebecca says yes. Everybody else? Okay, good. All right. So this is a visual search experiment of the version of which you have on the Blackboard. So here, the target is the green circle. So I'm going to click the space bar. If it works, maybe not. Okay, so let's do it again. Oh, okay, here we go. Do you see the green circle, guys? Yes. So I would click on the whatever key I am supposed to click, but it's not going to work, perhaps. Too slow, it says, because I'm talking to you. All right. No, no green bar, no green circle. No green circle. No green circle. No green circle. All right. Yes. No. Yes. 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 No. So it's not particularly difficult, right? Now imagine, I don't want to do that because it's going to take us quite some time, that now you are looking for a green circle, which is your target, among targets that are green squares and blue circles. So now you have to decompose that into color and shape, and it becomes now a conscious effort. So now the amount of distractors will make a huge difference on the reaction time, okay? But not in the, this is called a primitive or a single feature search. Easy. When you have the conjoined feature search, it becomes much more difficult. Allowing Ann Treisman and her team to have this idea that visual attention is a two-stage process. Okay. So do that if you have time and interested in this kind of stuff. Again, like I say, it doesn't have to be you. It could be a member of your family who is bored, has nothing to do. All right. So now we're moving to the very interesting point that we actually observe in our everyday life. So the first applied topic that we discussed was driving and cell phone use. Now this is something called inattentional blindness. Now the person who is famous for inattentional blindness is Dan Simons. And here is, remember I told you the story about the 200-pound gorilla that showed up on the stage of APA convention. Well, he wrote this book. Again, if you're interested in this kind of popular science, it's a really nicely written book called The Invisible Gorilla. And he's famous for a bunch of other interesting phenomena that has to do with this notion of inattentional blindness. Okay, let's do one other little demonstration. Hopefully the sound will work this time. So get ready with your notebooks or with your sheet of paper. Just follow the instructions from the clip.
This is a movie perception test. Watch this brief video of a conversation, and then I'll ask you some questions about it.
Hi, Sabina.
Hi.
Well, it's been a long time since I've seen you.
Yeah, it's great to see you, Andrea.
So how did you get here?
I took the subway from Middleton, and it took only about half an hour.
Do you get the sound? Again, let me ask you this technical question.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Let's continue.
Really? I drove from Gresham and it took 45 minutes.
Hooray for public transportation.
So why did you call me here for this mysterious meeting?
I'm planning a surprise party for Jerome, and I need your help to keep him away from the house.
That's great. I'll do anything you need.
Good.
I hate surprise parties, but only when I'm the victim. Otherwise, they're great.
Very good.
Other than the strange dialogue about a surprise party, did you notice anything unusual?
All right, let me stop. That's a question to you guys. Did you notice anything unusual about this short clip? And if it is, what is it? Okay, no, I didn't. Rebecca says no. Okay. Now remember, this is the demonstration of inattentional blindness. That is, you're not noticing something that happens in this clip. Anybody else? So because of this inattentional blindness, there are some changes that happened throughout the clip. In fact, there were, I think it's 9 changes. Okay, let's see if we can continue.
In our book, The Invisible Gorilla and Other Ways Our Intuitions Deceive Us, we discuss the illusion of memory. We think we perceive and remember more of our world than we actually do. The movie you just watched had 9 intentional editing mistakes. Did you spot any of them? Watch it again. Notice that the woman on the right, Sabrina, is wearing a
Oops.
scarf. In a moment, we'll have a close-up and the scarf will be gone. Notice the scarf is gone and Andrea, the woman on the left, has her arm on the table. Now it's at her chin. Scarf is back. Notice that the plates are red. Now they're white and Andrea's arm is back on the table. Now they're red and Sabrina's arm is off of the table. Notice that the food is in front of Sabrina. Now it's in front of Andrea. The cups and the spoon have also switched places, and Sabrina's arm is on the table when it wasn't before. Most people don't notice any of the changes, a phenomenon known as change blindness. But most people are confident that they would notice the changes. That is the illusion of memory. Check out our book, The Invisible Gorilla, to learn more. www.theinvisiblegorilla.com.
So are you guys surprised that you haven't noticed any of these? Some are very obvious, right? When the scarf disappears or the plates become white. Some are subtle, like the position of the arms. Okay, so that is sometimes is called change blindness. Actually, it might be a little bit more subtle than inattentional blindness. But that's the idea. The idea is that when we watch, and the producers and directors of movies know that quite well, when they change the angle, switch in between figures. If anybody watches Beat Bobby Flay in that show has 2 contendants, 2 other chefs who compete against each other so that they can go against Bobby Flay in round 2. And then Bobby says, now I'll give you the ingredient of my choice. And at that moment, the camera switches to the 2 or one of the 2 contenders, and then comes back to Bobby, and he is holding something like, I don't know, mango in his hand. Again, so they are using this fact that we're not watching, we're not paying attention to change. And you can see that in the movies sometimes. If you Google, you can find a bunch of movies where this inattentional blindness kind of saved the producers and the director, because they really had some strange errors in their video. So do an activity that's related to this, and it's posted on the Blackboard. Let's look at another one, which I think is very hilarious. Also comes from Dan Simon's lab.
The door study. This video shows a participant from a 1998 study by Daniel Simons and Daniel Levin. Watch what happens as the unsuspecting pedestrian provides directions. The young man on the left is one of the experimenters. He has approached the white-haired man and asked for directions. Watch closely as 2 people carrying a door pass between them, and the first experimenter is replaced by someone else. Like many of the people in this study, the pedestrian was entirely unaware that he was talking to a different person. Approximately 50% of the people approached in this study didn't notice when the person they were talking to was replaced by someone else. This study was among the first to demonstrate that change blindness can occur outside of the laboratory. This video is from research by Daniel Simons and Daniel Levin and is copyrighted. It is available for use in talks, training, and teaching on DVDs from VisCog Productions. Learn more at theinvisiblegorilla.com.
Okay, here's another question for you guys. So isn't it amazing that the older person who was giving the direction did not notice the switch? But what made the switch easy not to notice? Or I could reformulate this question by saying, if we use why someone would be replaced. But imagine instead of having another guy reappear after the people with the door passed, we have a woman talking to the older person. Would he notice the gender switch?
I would think so.
Absolutely. So notice that in the in this clip, the two people, the first guy and the second guy, were very similar. Maybe clothing was a little bit different. The first guy had like a darker jacket, and this one had a coat, had like a lighter coat. But they both were approximately the same age, approximately the same height, approximately the same hair. So if you're not paying attention to any of these features, then it's kind of easy to miss. But if it were a woman who reappeared after the door, and still, as you could see the statistics, half people did notice and half didn't. It's interesting also that the two experimenters were younger guys versus the older person who was giving the directions. It also has been found since then, because this is more than 20 years ago, that if you manipulate the age, so if the person who were talking to the participant were an older person switched by another older person, it increases the likelihood of noticing, because as an older person you're paying more attention to people of your age. The same applies to race and many other things. So this inattentional blindness or change blindness is actually a very multifaceted phenomenon. It's not as simple as Dan Simons demonstrates it in his work, but it's very fascinating. So again, I suggest that you do an activity that will allow you to explore the change blindness effect, or inattentional blindness. Again, sometimes these two terms are used as synonyms, not necessarily true, but happens. All right, let's finally do a little bit on our everyday life. And, is distraction a good thing? Could distraction be a good thing? Let's put it this way. Here is another little demonstration for you. You don't have to do anything, just watch.
You're watching America This Morning, America's #1 early morning news.
Get ready to feel a little guilty for laughing on this one. Here is our latest and greatest evidence that no one should attempt to walk and text at the same time.
Now, this girl right here, she's walking, she's texting, and goes, whoop, straight into the fountain.
Oh.
It all went down recently at a mall in Pennsylvania.
The best part might just be her reaction. Just get up and walk away and hope no one saw it. Don't worry, no one did see it, except thankfully for the surveillance camera.
And there's an iPhone app that does let you see in front of you through your camera as you text. So if you really got to walk and text, try that app.
We've all had some mishap happen while texting, haven't we?
This is true.
So this video went viral when it was made available on the internet. Obviously, it's from the security cameras. And people were very interested in why this woman would fall into the fountain. Obviously, she's texting, right? So it's a mall. So she must have been a client, right? She must have been a customer who came to do some shopping in the mall. But you know, actually, what happened when they started talking to her? She's actually an employer, an employee of the mall. That is, she knew the mall very well. So it shows how, you know, little distraction could be dangerous even in the situation that, location that you know so well. I mean, there are numbers of people who are being taken to the emergency room because they walked into the trees while texting, fell through manholes, stepped into the traffic, all while texting, being distracted. So is that a bad thing? Now, perhaps you've been hearing this a lot. I have, that people today are not communicating with one another, right? Because we are so into our cell phones and our tablets and our computers, our cell phones in particular, because we go out to the restaurant, we sit down with our friends or family, and we are staring into our phone. Sometimes people are trying to be polite. They have the phone on the side and they sort of sneak glances at the phone, but everybody noticed that they do that. So interesting. We think of that as a bad thing, right? We should not be distracted. We should be able to focus, to sustain attention, to do things that would be helpful. But there is a line of thought that says that actually distraction in general may not be so bad, because in the old days, before all the technology, if you get distracted because you want to know what's going on, right? Something is happening, and what is it? And if we do that, we need to be able to think of attention as fulfilling these two functions. We talked about selective attention mostly today. There is also divided attention. So we need to be able to focus, but we also need to stay alert and aware of our surroundings. So if you are distracted by something that's going on outside of your immediate circle where you're paying attention to, it may be a good thing, because it will allow us to perhaps be sort of more curious about situation, and that will make our life easier and maybe more interesting. So being distracted to something that happens outside the immediate focus of attention is not necessarily a bad thing. In fact, there could be some evolutionary advantage of doing that. Interestingly, so now fast forward to the 21st century, we have all these devices, tech stuff around us. And if you start looking at that, it turns out that people who have been inventing and designing, let's say, smartphones in particular, know all about our problems with attention. So a lot of these devices are designed in such a way as to play off on the fact that we are very curious. So we want this constant stimulation, all right? It provides us with a continuous stream of new information. We just can't resist that, all right? So there is actually now a movement among many tech engineers saying that we have to have some kind of a restrain approach to our new designs, especially when it comes to technology and children. And we should be like doctors. We should be creating some tech devices that are that don't harm people and don't harm children in particular. So one could think of distraction as being driven by curiosity and giving us some kind of a evolutionary advantage in life. So it's not necessarily a bad thing to be able to spend so much time on the phone, as long as it feeds our curiosity. So my last activity for you guys would be to perhaps think about this question. Could smartphones and other screens be decreasing the human attention span? So to answer this question, you need to first find out what the human attention span is in terms of its capacity or length or whatever it might be. And then find out what happens to the attention span when you are distracted by devices. Is there such a thing as a smartphone addiction? Okay, and that's that. We don't have time for any of this. If you don't have any questions for me, the class is over, and I'll see you guys on Thursday.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Take care, Isaac.
Thank you, Professor.
So Leroy, wait for me to open the tests for you tomorrow, okay?
And you said the password.
Yes, there will be a password that I will send to you.
To me. You're gonna email that to me?
Yes, I will email the passwords to you.
Thank you.
Okay, see you guys on Thursday.
Have a nice day.